Started. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Matt Mace. I'm the fire chief for the Raytown Fire District. And first and foremost, thank you all for coming. I'm hoping the banners brought everybody in, but probably the newspapers and all the other stories and everything else that's going on. But this meeting actually came to be, we requested it with the city on the 29th of April. And they declined, and they said they'd come, and some of them did. And I promised them, and I'm going to keep to my word, that this is not going to be a they did this or we did this kind of meeting. I'm extremely grateful they're here. For the most part, 99% of the city's staff has been excellent to work with. They have wanted to hear what we had to say, and they've been as frustrated as we have about getting this done. So I'm very grateful they're here. I'm very encouraged that they're here. And going forward, I'm hoping this is a sign of things to change. But that said, for those of you that don't know, last Wednesday the city had a work session. And in that work session there were no public comments. The only two people that spoke besides the aldermen were the two attorneys. And it was kind of surreal because I got to hear about myself, third party removed, or I don't know, it's kind of surreal. But there was no video taken. I've not seen any published minutes. I've seen some highlights in the papers. So what I'm going to ask of the city folk is, in order to keep me honest, I'm going to kind of go over the notes I took. And if I'm not accurate, raise your hand and let me know, because I want to get that out now. Because I strive extremely hard to keep notes and to stay up on it. So if something I say or portray in here isn't exactly how you wanted it or you understood it, just raise your hand. Is that fair? Okay. So with that said, this picture right here was on the cover of the TIF binder that was given to all the municipalities, or all taxing jurisdictions in Raytown in 2006. This was the image that was portrayed by Block & Company as being the development to take place. $101 million. And so that's kind of the theme of this. So I'm not going to use any PowerPoint. I'm simply going to show you documents. Can it clear there?
Take it out of the binder, take it out of the plastic.
There. Actually, let's start with this one first. These are the notes that I took from the work session Wednesday night. So, the city's TIF attorney, Chris Williams, from Campo Williams, gave a 15-minute, 20-minute presentation on how we got where we are. And in that presentation, he was clear that the city is still not compliant with the TIF reporting requirements, even if they've been reported they are. The city is required to have a public hearing every 5 years. They're required to publish a written document outlining the TIF project and how it's performing. And they're required to publish in a paper of annual circulation a summary of these. And those events still have not taken place. This TIF project is 15 ordinances long, 6 agreements, and 1,000 pages. This is every document it takes for this project. There's a saying in politics and law. Does anyone know what it is? When it takes a lawyer this many pages, somebody's getting the short end of the stick. And it's probably all of us. The city issued $3.9 million for the TIF bonds in 2007. I'm sorry, $39.9 million. Of that $39 million, $31 million were actually available for use. That was the first time I think any of us had heard that number. Because I looked at the board's face as well, they didn't understand it either. What that meant was that $4 million was in reserves. So when the reports come out that says the city has strong reserves in this TIF project, they're actually paying 6% interest on the money they borrowed to have money in reserves, or 5.65%, I rounded up. Additionally, they paid $4 million towards the money they borrowed, with the money they borrowed, to pay for the first 2 years of the bond project. Again, they're paying interest on it. I believe Mr. Myers kind of broke that down for them. Yeah, no, it's just, it doesn't make sense to pay 6% interest on money that you're paying the money down with, to me, but I don't know. Of the $31 million that was available, $22 million, or 71% of the TIF funds, were spent on the Raytown School District. So 2 out of every $3 spent went to a non-taxing jurisdiction. Now, at the last minute, Walk & Company pulled out of Project 1 and forced the city to serve as the developer. And I mean last minute. I found the minutes from the meeting where these were approved, and I don't fault the alderman, because if you don't remember, this was the first meeting in April of 2007. The aldermen that were in place had been in place for 16 minutes. Literally, they were sworn into that meeting and then told they had to go in executive session and talk about this and vote on it. Those aldermen were not given the documents. The minutes reflect they were not prepared or ready. The lawyers were working on them as of 4:30 that day, and they hoped to have them by the time of the second reading. But they spent $40 million without even having the documents in front of them. In 2011, Block & Company reduced the size of the project from $101 million to $76.5 million. Because of this reduction, they requested to have the language restricting the use of sales tax proceeds removed in December of 2011, and the city granted this. Prior to this, there was a restriction on the use of sales tax that it can only be used for infrastructure and right-of-way. And I know there were some arguments made that, well, school districts are technically infrastructure. The language, and I'll show you in here, is clear that it has to be within the right-of-way or easement. And
ultimately owned by the city.
Or a public entity, either one. But it's clear, the language is, they actually broke out the costs prior to this. And there's even minutes to reflect why this is in place. I actually spoke to one of the TIF members, or TIF commission members at the time. And I'll get into that here in a little bit.
Before you move on, this might be a good place to show that, what I was telling you, how the same time Block was asking to change that, they were.
Oh, well, I'll get into that. We go over these one at a time. Attorney Joe Willerth stated that it was unreasonable for the fire district to hold the current board of aldermen to comments made by previous boards. It was asked, or stated, that the fire district feels it's entitled to have an accurate accounting of expenditures. It's actually in our agreement that didn't get brought up. That in our agreement with the city that we signed in 2007 guarantees it. It was stated that the city and the fire district have had several meetings attempting to resolve this. Does anybody know how many meetings we've actually had? One meeting on March 4th. Now, our attorney and the TIF attorney have met twice since then, or once outside of there. And that meeting, they couldn't proceed because of the documentation that was given. Didn't make sense. Can I ask something of the board, Alderman, just for a minute? Was anybody here given a spreadsheet copy of the expenditures? It's like 40 pages long. Did it make sense to any of you all? Because if you don't have it in the Excel document format, you try to get it on paper, and I have a copy here, the way the margins are lined out, it's 4 pages wide and 40 pages long. So it prints 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So when you try to read it, it made no sense at all. So our attorney actually said, this doesn't make sense, I can't understand it, there's no dates on here. And the TIF attorney agreed and said, let me take that back and I'll fix this. Is that a fair representation? Which was completely different than the way it was portrayed Wednesday night. It was stated that the fire district has never made a written request or a demand letter. Actually, we gave one to the Board of Aldermen early in February. He said we wanted to have a permanent seat on the TIF commission. We wanted a public commission to review the expenditures. We wanted the amount of overpayment by the fire district returned. We wanted to update the TIF update agreement between the two entities to reflect the current changes that were made in 2011. And it was stated that the fire district did not respond to Joe Willer's letter on April 28th. In fact, we did respond and invited him to attend a public meeting, or to attend a meeting. We didn't actually call for it to be public. We actually envisioned for it to be an executive session. But then, he responded back, and we're actually having a public meeting today. So we have been in constant communication. We've been frustrated as the city council is, as I'm sure everybody is. We want to put this past us. We want to move forward in a positive and productive manner. The timeline of this TIF project, I think it's important for us to understand how we got here. And for full disclosure, I ripped off and duplicated this from Mr. Collins over here, the Brookings Eagle. He had published this on Friday's paper, and it was as good as I could remember, so I just took it and ran with it. But in March of 2005, a TIF district with fire department, or 4 development projects comprising of 30.5 acres was approved. In 2006, they combined 3 and 4. Project relocation costs increased from 10 to 18.5 million. The total project cost was 101 million. The community improvement district was formed for a 7/8 cent sales tax. There's also a transportation district tax of 1/8 cent to give them a whole of 1 cent. In our investigation, speaking to former aldermen, this was presented to the city council at the time as a super TIF, according to Pat Ertz, when I met with him. And they called it a super TIF because there was no other funding mechanisms available to be used on this project. They used them all to make this thing try to work. In 2007, the city issued $39.9 million bond, had 31.9 at disposal, and the rest was for project funds or reserve funds and to pay down the bond. In September of 2009, Walmart opened and began generating tax revenue. In 2010, the TIF plan was amended to shore up legal descriptions. If you're not aware, in the first 3 editions of this, what we call Project 1 or Walmart was actually legal description of Project 3. Project 3 was listed as Project 2. Project 2 is actually Project 1. So try to keep track of who's on first. And that made it through literally 3 revisions until 2010, because they did one in 2004, they passed one in 2006, and then 2007, before they even caught that they had the wrong plats and wrong legal descriptions. In 2011, phase 2 of the development project was activated. This is where they removed the TIF language, or the economic activities taxes or sales tax language. They also decreased the project from 101 to 76.5. They had to take out that language by Locke's request because by devaluing the property, now there's less income from property tax to cover the expenditures. So then with the sales tax was to be used for infrastructure. And there's language in there specific to sales tax that says that once these needs have been met, that sales tax is to be returned to the taxing jurisdictions as a surplus every year. That language wouldn't have been in there, but for this, it was in here. When I asked former TIF Commissioner Bruce Brook why that language is in there, when they put it in there, he said that there was concern amongst the TIF Commission that this TIF was completely paid up front. All the money was given out instantly instead of pay as you go, how most of them were done. In other words, there was no incentive for the developer to develop anything because he got all the money up front. So in order for this project to work, the TIF Commission put that hook in place that they had to have property tax values generating or the project wouldn't work. Turns out that hook was right, but instead of actually holding them to it, they just lifted that requirement and let the sales tax then go to cover the bonds. In 2015, we learned this on Wednesday. In March of 2015 was the 10-year anniversary of the TIF project, and by state statute, that phase 3 of the project, 3 and 4 now, is dead. It cannot be activated. So the money that was allocated to projects 3 and 4, and I've got the cost breakdown for each, has been spent, on other parts of the project, but aren't available to pay down the bonds, and there's no way for that area to generate revenue.
Matt,
Yes.
where's 3 and 4?
3 and 4 is the big vacant lot across from the old YMCA at 350 and Harding.
So that you know, when we were sold that originally, that was to be the cash cow that was going to pay it.
Right.
This TIF language I keep referring to. So here's exactly what it says. There you go. It says the economic activity tax or sales tax as paid to the city, deposited in, let me zoom in here. Says that the economic activity tax shall be used exclusively to fund public improvements and other reimbursable project costs that are within the public easements and right-of-way and will ultimately be owned by the city or another public entity. So they have to be within the right-of-way or they have to be within an easement. When this was updated in 2007, the language stated, it wasn't until 2011 when the project was devalued by $50,000 that language was removed. Why that's important is that was a hook the fire district really thought was worthwhile because it guaranteed that the money being spent was used on things to benefit the community, not just private businesses or even the school district and in infrastructure. And it needed things to improve 50 Highway. Now, it was said during Wednesday's meeting that those project costs didn't never make sense or could never happen. So, in the TIF documents and in the bond documents, it spells out exactly what public infrastructure costs are. It spells out exactly in phases 1 and 2 what they are and what they're not. They are not school district buildings. They are not land for the school district to own. They were right-of-way things such as sidewalks, turn lanes, lights, realigning 50 Highway to allow more area to be developed. Those costs are all outlined here. And they break it all out. So, you know, that money was real money. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a typo. It was included in there. And in the bond documents here, your public improvements, it's included there. And in Project 2, it's included. So if you look at the cost of realigning 350 Highway, that alone is $2.4 million. So like I say, that public economic activity tax was intended exactly for what it says it is. It wasn't a mistake, it wasn't a typo. Anybody got a question so far? Okay. So in 2007, the city came to the fire district and said, we'd like your help. Because there is a law in place that says the city's entitled, the fire district's entitled to between 50 and 100% reimbursement. It doesn't say they can request, it doesn't say they might ask, it says they're entitled to. And the city came to us and said, and I actually have the PowerPoint presentation they presented us, because Mike doesn't throw anything away. city needs the fire district's help. To issue these bonds, they needed 50% of our sales tax and 100% of our property tax. It says state law requires between 50 and 100 reimbursement. This would enhance their ability to finance the project. It says that for the area that Walmart is located on, the fire district currently earns $1,754 in property tax, and will continue to earn that. Now, I will tell you, as of this current year, can anybody guess how much money we've earned on that project? Michael?
I can guess that we haven't earned any money on that.
Zero. We've not been reimbursed for any of that. $1,784 a year, $54 a year for the last 12 years. Presentation to the board. This rebate will only be applicable to the Walmart deal. It's pretty clear. Minutes from the June 20th fire board meeting,
What year?
2006. Okay. Could you kill maybe that first bank of lights? Turn on the, is that glare button there? Now turn on the cans,
Sure.
please. Is that better or worse?
Works for me.
Is that better? Okay.
It'll get brighter.
So Mark Claytonberg, who's an attorney from King Hershey, who was the attorney for the project, if you will, was in attendance, said that the board, meaning the fire board, having already waived the district's statutory right to sales tax and property tax on only Project 1, Mr. Bruck asked Mr. Klinkenberg if the contribution of the $450,000 for the capital expenses that may be incurred by the district due to its development, if it's still in place, with the restrictions placed on the sales tax. And he assured the board that there would be payable at the time, sufficient revenue was generated for Project 3, and that they would issue community improvement district revenue bonds to continue to have a revenue stream being generated by the project and to pay the cost up front. So when they came and met with us, they clearly outlined that they understood there was requirements put on that sales tax they were given, and that this only pertained to Project 1. It goes on further to say,
But does that mean that they had a plan in place to pay for it without the sales tax revenue? Is that what that's trying to say?
I don't know. You remember, Greg? The only reason why I'm not picking on Greg, but to my knowledge, he was the only one on the board, or Barb. Do you remember?
What was the question again?
If that statement there, meaning they had a plan of they were trying to have a plan in place to fund this once the sales tax ended?
I wasn't aware of a plan
Okay,
after the sales tax had been done.
okay. Yeah. So it goes on to say that at the time we had a seat on the TIF commission that was actually given to us by the county, and that was going to expire. We requested the city give us a seat at the TIF commission then, and said there's only permanent seats from the city, and that he should still have a seat for projects 1 and 2. We were never given that seat.
Last week was indicating that we never requested a seat on the table.
Correct. We were, in the discussions last Wednesday, it was reflected that we never requested having a seat on the commission. So this is the actual ordinance passed by the city. Looks like it passed unanimously. This this was the ordinance between the fire district and the city for an agreement. It was brought up last week that the fire district believes it's entitled to have an accounting of expenditures, which I think is a silly statement to make, but actually I think it's in the agreement, it's not in the ordinance.
What's his state statute?
There it is. Where's that? There it is, section 2A. To document for Raytown Fire Protection District's review the capital investments for the relocation of school district facilities in conjunction with the improvements necessary in projects. So they'll provide us with how the money was spent. It's not a that was, like I say, this one was signed. By the city administrator, fire district president, fire board president, Tom Blair Ross. Any questions so far? Okay. So how we got here was earlier this year, actually earlier in 2015, specifically, we get a quarterly bill from the city for reimbursement for these sales tax funds. The city seizes all of the property tax from the county when it comes out annually, but the sales tax we actually get, and the city has to request reimbursement through us, and that wasn't quite made clear last Wednesday. It's not the other way around. The city's requesting reimbursement from us, not us requesting from them. So they started billing us for Napa, who moved from Raytown to Raytown, and that didn't seem appropriate. We emailed Mr. Lawfrey and reached out to him, and the response we got was, too bad, you owe it, pay it. No. It was, I disagree with your attorney's recollection of it, your attorney's opinion on it, and we would let you know when the fire district owes it. This went back and forth and back and forth, and it ended up here. And in our research and looking at it, we were trying to account for how the money was spent. And in doing so, I did some research.
And show the date on that letter so you could show when we started trying to have this conversation.
November of 2011.
Yeah, November 11th, 15th.
In my research, it was determined that we shouldn't have to look that hard to find an accounting for the documents, because each year, the governing body should prepare a report concerning the status of the project, the allocation funds, the amount of pledge revenues, the assessed valuation, payments and lieu taxes, economic activity taxes.
What document are you looking at?
This is the Missouri State Statute, Chapter 99. And it basically spells everything out. It goes on to say that every 5 years after established redevelopment plan, after establishing a redevelopment plan, the body has to hold a public hearing. The purpose of this hearing shall be to determine the redevelopment project that is making satisfactory progress under the proposed time schedule, and the projects that were proposed are being accomplished. Notice this hearing has to be advertised in a newspaper of local circulation once every week for 4 weeks prior to the hearing. In addition to that, they have to prepare an annual report to the state auditor from the Speaker of the House of Representatives, and it has to be sent off to the state. Actually goes to the Department of Revenue now. So in our research and looking at that, we went to Nicole Galloway's website. And this is all publicly accessible documents. And this is all we found in February of 2016. Now, the highlighted ones there, there's two different highlights. There's one that says 2009, 10, and 11 350 highway TIF projects. Those are the only 3 years the city has submitted any reporting of these documents, of this project. In 2015, for some reason before this, there was 2 reports made for USA 800. We learned later that the only reason USA 800 was being caught up to date was they were doing their own. I don't know how they were doing it, because apparently there's a PIN number that's hard to come by. I didn't understand that the other night, but
They would have been getting it from the
yeah,
city.
USA 800 managed to get this PIN number and do their own reporting. But 29, 10, and 11 were the only years there was reporting. In our talking to Mark Williams of Campo and Williams, Chris Williams, I'm sorry, we learned that oddly enough in 2011, that was his last year of actually being retained by the city to oversee this project. At that point, the city had hired full-time internal counsel by the name of Nancy Thompson, and his services were dismissed and no longer needed. They requested all of the documents from the TIF project from him. They were given 6 boxes of documents, and part of our challenge through this whole deal is those documents could not be recovered. We met with the city, met with the mayor, presented him with this. He was gracious, he thanked us, and that's what led to the subsequent press release, and everyone's kind of aware that there was a little bit of a snafu there. The documents that were available online, this is what kind of made us go, huh?
The ones that were filed, the 3
The
million.
3 that were filed. So this is the 2009 to 2010 document. This is the expenditures that were listed. Under public infrastructure, there's no dollar figure given. Under acquisition of buildings and land was $9,210,000. $16 million for relocation of the Herndon building, and $1.4 million for administrative expenses. They list the total, this is 2009 and 10, mind you, the total anticipated project costs were $5 million. Now they've spent $32 million, but they said it should only cost them $5 million. So we said, okay, that's just a mistake. That happens.
Matt,
Yes,
the 1.4 million in fees, what does that mean?
I couldn't tell you.
I mean,
It's part of what-
somebody got paid $1.4 million in fees.
Well, that's what that document reflects. So let's go
But it
to,
doesn't reference to 4 left.
right. So let's go to the next year. This is the 2010 filing. Same numbers.
Still no infrastructure.
Still no infrastructure. Anticipated project cost, $101 million.
Really a lot.
Next year. 11 and 12. No infrastructure. Site development now is 5 million. Land is 9.2 million. School district relocation, 17 million.
No administrative costs anymore.
Still 101 million.
Matt, can you cover, you had a question out here.
Yes.
Who signed each of those different years?
Sure. So in 2012, which was the last year it was filed,
2011.
2011 to 2012 year. Mahesh Sharma,
Who prepared it?
Mark Lawford, and 2009 and 2010 was prepared by Beth Lynn, and it was signed by Mayor David Bauer. And 10 and 11, it was prepared by John Benson, and it was also signed by Mahesh Sharma. Now, fast forwarding, after this was brought to their attention, it was reported that all the documents were caught up to date and everything's been filed, and the city was up to date with everything. As I said, we learned on Wednesday night that they still haven't held the public meetings. They haven't published the documents. And I'll show you this document in a minute. This isn't something like a 2-page deal. It's fairly intensive. So here's the most recent one filed by Mark Lawford. Project status is fully operational. It was listed that it was moved from, or it was area type was blight, and had a high unusual cost made by public financing unfeasible and reasonable. Had significant public infrastructure investment, and the project required parcel or assembly of other relocation costs. Now, remind you, they've only spent about $800,000 in public infrastructure.
Matt, do you have a calculation of revenue generated that you're estimating should have been spent on public infrastructure?
I do. I'll show that to you here. So, well, it was in that document I showed you a little while ago. It showed $3 million for moving the highway. All in all, it was about $14 million. Shows site development now is $5.5 million, $9.2 million, and $17 million. So if somebody's really good at math, what's that work out to be?
It's still in public infrastructure.
No public infrastructure, but
32, 33 maybe.
33 million. Now, how much did we say they had available on bonds?
31.9?
31.9. They spent 33. Now, on page 2, it says anticipated. Anticipated reimbursement costs. Okay, this is what the project's called out, not what they did. Public infrastructure, $14 million. That's included in the $45 million of the bonds, of the project costs. And the anticipated cost is still listed here as $101 million, even though it was reduced to $75 million
In 2000.
in 2011. Now, why that's important is these are the documents that are submitted to Moody's and Standard & Poor's, and that the credit rating is based off of. That says this is a fully operational project with a value of $101 million.
And what is the
And this is what the bond, this is the disclosure that the bondholders get.
What were you told when you pointed out the inconsistency in the documents?
That there is no means to check it, no one that follows up with the accuracy of it, and that it's really hard to fill out. So I went online and printed off the how-to guide to prepare it. Because I thought, okay, well, maybe it is hard. You know, I just went to community college. I'm not an accountant. It seems pretty straightforward to me, especially when you get to line 29, break down how the pilots and needs have been spent. Seems like it makes sense. The anticipated total project costs. Indicate how it will be financed. Estimate how long it will take to retire these bonds. Briefly describe. I mean, it doesn't seem that hard. We keep talking about this annual report that's not been published and never has. This is Blue Springs. Now, when we met with Mr. Williams, the TIF attorney, he had another name for this report. Can you guess what it was? The Estes report. Named after Dan Estes because he prototyped this for the City of Liberty. Those of you that don't know, Dan Estes was our finance director at the time of this project's inception. Now, if you look at this document, it is very, very comprehensive. They prepare this annually. Show exactly where the money's been expended, the percentage of the project that's left, when the bonds mature, the scope of the project, basic descriptions of the agreements, the comparables,
Like before
before and after pictures, who you can call if you have questions about it. Email addresses. If you go online, you can pull these up all day long for Liberty, Summit, Blue Springs,
Yeah.
Raymore. Just not for us. Instead, we got this one. It's a nice document, but I wish it had some tips. This would have been a good opportunity to talk about the TIF project. In this hearing every 5 years, mind you, it is required by law that the board pass a new ordinance authorizing the continuation of these funds and these taxes. Here is an example of what that, this isn't something that doesn't get done. It's obscure. I'll get that glare out of there. So this is a city outside St. Louis, I believe. That basically says we've had our hearing, we've reviewed it. They're on track like they're supposed to be, and they're being accountable with public money. Now, it was brought up that in 2011, when the developer devalued the property and changed the language, it was actually December of 2011. Well, what was due January to February of 2012?
Shoot, just do about
The first 5-year meeting, which would have been a really good opportunity to have that talk. What's interesting about it is the same time this developer is saying, I'm going to devalue the property and change the scope of where the money's going,
And we need to capture the sales taxes.
we got to capture the money.
Hey, Matt, point of clarification on that. You're saying the developer modified the contract. Are you speaking in terms of block, or are you speaking in terms of the city as the developer?
It'd be blocked.
Okay.
That was the right one.
Is that it? Where does it show it?
The top there, the top of it has the valuation. And then the bottom has the tax paid. The top part has the valuation.
There it is.
This is for the
So in
big
20
vacant lot,
Right, this is for the big vacant lot on Hershey.
where the majority of the development was supposed to occur.
This would have been the thing, the kind of thing that came up during the public hearing. So in 2011, that property was worth $66,000. In 2012, at the same time he's negotiating this agreement, they devalued the property to $950 value. Now, how many people here would buy that piece of land for $950? Right.
But it's only like a 1/3, that's not an actual, when they value property, it's not actual.
Right, so it's only getting taxed at $304 a year. So there's no incentive to develop this property.
No, it's getting taxed less than that, it's getting taxed at $32.32 in 2012.
Well, that's the amount that was due, but the value is assessed at $304.
He went from paying how much is that, $2,600 in taxes on that property?
Paid $2,600 in 2011, they paid in the rears because he was delinquent when he made the change. He was delinquent for 2011 and he paid $2,628, and then in 2012 his taxes dropped to $32. So these would have been the things that would have came out in this public hearing. That's why that hearing was so important and vital.
And at the same time, that property was rezoned agricultural. He went to the county and got it rezoned agricultural.
Now, we talked about this project having an estimated cost of $75 million. So this is Walmart's value, according to the county. This isn't the city's fault, but this is just part of the problem that the project's not living up to market. According to them, it's worth $12 million. And we spent $22 million and change to move it for a blighted building to build a building worth $12 million. Oddly enough, their building is actually going down in value on the highway there. Now, I realized there was an economic downturn and property values in Raytown dropped in 2008, 2009, 2010. Just a show of hands, how many girls' homes went down in value in the last 2 years? How many of them went up? Right. Now, Walmart dropped $250,000. Now, why that's important is the less their building's valued, the longer it takes to pay back the loan. Because that comes off the money that's taxed. In looking at part of this project and in the scope of it, in our investigation, this billboard right here I hate. It's a source of contention for me. He used to say, hey, there used to be a Dodge dealership here, but if you want to buy a Dodge, go to Lee Summit now. Remember that billboard?
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, where the IHOP is?
Yeah.
So, does anybody remember what used to be on that land?
Yeah.
Gas station.
Gas station.
No, this was the MoPub substation. Hasn't been there in years. It's actually owned by Viacom. Okay, not KCP&L. Here's why this was important. Because this is in the TIF district. Can anybody see how much taxes it brings in?
It's the third column down. The one that says 0, 0, 0, 0, 0.
Because it's still listed as a public utility, because it was where the substation was. No one's ever taken it on the, I'll put it back on the tax roll.
And Viacom hasn't gone.
Yeah, they're not gonna
Don't worry
volunteer.
about it.
Again, we're not the taxing jurisdiction, we're just people that started looking at it and going, wait, there's a problem here. This was brought to the mayor's attention as well. I've yet to hear any discussion about this at all. I realize your hands are tied to some extent, but at some point I would think it would warrant some action, at least some impetus for the county to make something right.
Well, I mean, issues like those are part of the reason this project is failing.
So, about a month ago, I was greeted in our lobby by the local media and had a camera stuck in my face and asked a bunch of questions about the project. And the thing that stuck out in everybody's head is, the fire chief says that if they can't make the project payments, the only two choices they have are to default on the loan or to reduce services. Which is true, I did say that, because I was asked, with the project costs going up, with the payments going up every year, the city doesn't have the money, where are they going to get it from? That's the only answer I know. If somebody's got a better answer, I don't know what it is, but you either reduce services, or you don't pay the bill. If you don't have it, you don't have it. And it wasn't a swipe, I wasn't saying the city, and I, quite frankly, told the mayor, if I misspoke, please come out and explain it to me, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. But this is the amortization schedule for this loan, these bonds, that's in the city's, let me zoom that back here. This is in the city's budget and audit every year. This isn't something we had to make up. Now, you notice in 2020, 2021, it starts marching up progressively. And then in 2024, for 4 years, we're paying roughly $4.5 million a year just in principal, and another $1 million a year in interest. That's where that statement came from. Now, the city's budget's roughly 2011, 12 million. So $5 million to $6 million a year in bond payments is half the city's annual budget. Now, this project is currently breaking even at $2 million a year. The $3 million a year it's going to take here in 3 to 4 years. Freddy's, while I like Freddy's and I like their milkshakes and I think they're a fine institution, another Walmart couldn't generate that amount of revenue. So that's the type of development we're looking at here, needing to make this project succeed.
Well, that's the type of development they sold the project on.
That's the type of development they built the project on. If they had $75 to $101 million to development, this project would be making the numbers. But at $12 million a year, plus the $600,000 a year for IHOP, it's not going to make it. That's the discussion we're trying to have. You know, we're not spelling doom and gloom, but if there's a plan out there, I think everybody's entitled to hear it. We want to be a part of it. We want to understand. But just to say that these numbers here, these are, I mean, if these numbers are inaccurate, please somebody tell me now, but they're in your budget. And oddly enough, in the so for the figure 31 million minus the 22 million the school district got, so the $9 million that the project actually received, we're paying $76,826,000 to borrow. You see how I got there? Because that's the only money that's going towards a taxing jurisdiction.
Matt,
Yes.
do you have numbers from the city that shows what is being produced by the TIF district?
I wish I did.
Your attorney's here, am I correct?
She's right
Is
here.
that public information?
Should be.
I think it should be, I would defer to the city's attorney.
Well, when he says no, what do you do then?
Well, the information is spelled out clearly as what should be in the annual reports. And I don't think that's a question.
No, if that annual report is completed.
Matt, can I ask a question?
You certainly can.
Of your city attorney primarily?
I don't have, the city attorney's not here. I have a fire district
Your
attorney.
attorney, I
Okay.
Hang on, Sue.
To be clear. Obviously, you've gotten a huge education in TIF if you didn't have that before.
No, ma'am.
Yeah. I guess the question is, I mean, from what you've outlined here, we're pretty well hosed.
I hope not. I hope there's a plan in place and,
Well,
the fire station.
yeah, we're pretty well hosed. You're saying that the time's run out for the development of the other properties?
phase 3 is dead.
Okay, phase 3 is dead, so any potential income that could be found off of that would have to go through another TIF process, is that correct? And then we'd have to find money for it, which obviously we don't have.
We'd have to reissue TIF bonds and borrow more money and,
Yeah, so that's.
I
that
don't believe the
concept is
city
dead.
would actually be able to do, because of their failure to comply with the statutory reporting requirements. There is a certain period for which they would not be eligible to initiate, engage in additional TIF projects.
Okay.
Well,
In your estimation or in your overview, do you think the city has the potential of any legal recourse against the developer? That's essentially my question.
that was actually a question I wanted to ask Wednesday night, if I had been afforded. That was actually one of my list of questions I had, was, if the developer's not upheld their end of the obligation, then what's the city's recourse? Because I would assume there was something. Mr. Moore alluded to that a little bit with the question about the, help me out here. No, about who, the arbitrage.
Says there is,
About who did the arbitrage, or who?
Yeah, who arbitraged the bond deal? Who arbitraged it? They don't know.
Can I ask you a question now? What is your background? Because you blew me away, honestly, when you were, I was like, okay, he's obviously well versed in this.
Just construction.
Okay, so, I mean, I mean, so, is there recourse to go after the developer? I'm sure there is. The problem is the developer got $900,000 for project 1. And if you remember in the meeting Wednesday, we learned the developer did what?
Dropped out.
They dropped out, still got paid, which is good work if you can get it.
Yeah.
So the developer of project 1's the city. But, like I said, these are the, when that report says it's fully operational and all the expenditures have been made, it specifically lists out what they are.
Has the city listed how much is in that TIF account currently?
$3.9 million according to the mayor's latest press release.
And where's the other 4 million?
They used it to pay down the loan.
So it's not being created by the sales tax revenue.
Correct.
So
So-
at a reset point.
So do I understand you correctly, they borrowed money that they're paying 6% interest on to pay interest on? Is that?
Yes.
That says, I learned that Wednesday night.
we suspected that for some time, that they used some of the borrowed money to pay on the bond.
And so there's
The numbers
nothing
didn't make
illegal
sense.
about holding a reserve back. I am not a TIF expert. In fact, my original involvement with the fire district was doing sensitivity training and helping them with some HR things. And I have a corporate law background. And I specialize in contract law. I've been involved in numerous mergers and acquisitions. You know, here's the problem. It's not illegal to enter into a horrible, horrible contract. And when I had one of my first conversations with the TIF attorney on this, I mean, he said, wow, I've never seen anything like this. The school district, I said, I just don't know how this happened. If you borrow $40 million, the idea behind TIF is that you borrow money to facilitate a development that will generate tax revenue to pay the debt back and ultimately enrich the municipality. So if you borrow $40 million and give $22 million to a school district that generates zero revenue, I mean, you've already created a situation here that I don't understand how that would ever work. So I mean, that's, like I say, it's not.
I don't know how you spend 70% of it and it passes underwriting. That's been the question that I've asked, is how did it pass underwriting when 70% of these revenue, of the funds borrowed that were usable, went to an entity that can't produce taxes?
Is that even illegal?
Yeah.
It's not for me to say.
Yeah, and that's, I cannot speak to the city's legal position, and certainly would defer to Mr. Willard, the city's attorney. But as I was saying, and I'm truly not trying to be flip here, but there is nothing illegal intrinsically about entering into a bad contract. And so, at this point, you know, everybody needs to come together and figure out what is the best route. You know, the fire district, legal entity from the city of Raytown. The fire district is not a fire department that is a department of the city. They have their own board, and they get their own.
15 million,
Divided by 4.
Yeah,
Okay, it's a 4-year period.
but it's, 15 million divided by 4.
Right, so it'll be like 3.8 million, 3.9.
Okay, so those big numbers are not annual payments.
They're 4-year blocks. And this is that's the way it's, and I don't know how it grows. That's just the way it's listed in their budget.
I can tell you what it is if you stay there for a second. For the 2020.
And the city's budget is what now?
12 million, 11.5.
So what, third of the budget?
681.
Now, to be fair, the project's bringing in roughly $2 million a year. So there's a $1.8 million shortfall.
Hoping for inflation?
That's 3.775 million a year for the 2020 to 2024 period. And then it's gonna go up
Say that again.
3.775 million a year.
For starting in 2020, so in 3 years.
Right, and then after that, it would go to 1220000 plus 4312 700 divided by 4, and then it goes to it goes to 4 million.
Almost 4.2 million.
4.2 million a year.
That's through 2020.
Yeah.
So that would actually be, if it's 24 through 29. And that'd be for 5 years, 6 years, yeah.
Right.
So
And then the last 2 years, it's 5 million a year.
well, since the last digit's come off there, I don't know.
It's just 2 years, because it's 23 years.
That's the other thing. Did you confirm that if the city doesn't pay their portion, the district continues to pay taxes ad infinitum? Is that right?
So there's language in the bond agreement that says if the TIF is not satisfied at the end of 23 years, the taxes captured will continue even though the payment portions aren't required till the bondholders are satisfied. And the question I've asked, and I've yet to receive a solid answer from anyone, is if this project is not satisfied because there's not sufficient revenue, I realize the TIF project can only go 23 years, but can the bondholders keep recouping their cost out of our sales tax and our property tax until they're made whole? Does anybody know the answer?
The bondholder would probably extend those bonds as long as they retain interest income on it. Principal isn't the key, it's the issue, it's the interest drawn.
So I was afraid he was going to say.
Could they force the city to?
That I don't know. I don't know the verbiage of the contract.
Speaking of the bond agreement, so one of the things the fire district asked for was to have an agreement redrafted between the fire district and the city, because they changed the scope of the project in 2011 when they changed how they used our sales tax. And in all of our agreements and out of all of our documents, we only have an agreement between us and the city on project 1. You'll not find a document anywhere that mentions projects 2 anywhere. They don't have it because it doesn't exist. Here's the bondholder agreement. All, I don't know, 600 pages. The good thing about TIF documents is you can search them. So I did a search in here because the reasoning we were told we couldn't renegotiate an agreement was that the bond documents prohibited it. What words do you think would be in here if there was any type of stipulation on how our money is? Michael?
Fire district?
Fire district. You know how many times the word fire district appears in this document? Actually 3 times. But it talks about the fire truck being purchased out of phase 3. It talks about loss and damage to the properties being under the TIF. And it talks about the fire district's jurisdiction and where our boundaries are and our overall indebtedness and some other things like that. But in no way, shape, or form is there any obligation or anything spelled out in here about how our income is to be used. Oh, what else do I got? Anything? Okay, last but not least, and then I will sit down and shut up. We did request documents on how the money was spent, because we kind of felt like we should, like was expected. Well, hang on, I got one more thing, 2 more things. So, we talked about the fact that in 2011, they changed the language on how sales tax can be used. Well, since 2011, there's been no infrastructure or right-of-way improvements. Prior to 2011, the economic activity taxes you see them right there? That's CID. That's right here, sorry. Total, almost $1 million a year of the revenue. So 2010, so $3 million between 2010 and 2012. I don't have the 09. Let's call it half, just because I'm feeling generous. So at a minimum, there's $3.5 million that were collected of sales tax for infrastructure. In the expenditure documents, they actually break out. This is that spreadsheet I was telling you about. I can show you the actual spreadsheet, probably easier. Where am I going, Michael? There it is. Bear with me. They actually break out right-of-way improvements in the original documents. Why do you think they did that?
Can you zoom that in?
Hmm?
Can you zoom that in?
Sure.
View up there at the top. On the bottom right.
I can't see it.
The little bar down at the bottom right corner. Works, that works. There you go.
There you go. So the actual project budget broke out right-of-way improvements. Why do you think we did that? We didn't do it. Why do you think the city did it? because they had a track for it. So total, they've spent $832,000 in right-of-way improvements. We just said they collected $3.5 million, even before they changed the language.
They had collected in excess of this before they changed the law.
Correct. So, I know that question was asked Wednesday night. I heard one of the aldermen ask, so you mean to tell me we've done this? I think Mr. Green actually asked it. And I don't believe you ever got a real answer. I mean, I heard him say we made the payments, but these are their own documents here. So, yes, they collected $3.5 million, even before the language was changed, even though they were only entitled to $832,000. Yes, ma'am?
Matt, I think it's important to point out with this document, there are no paperwork or receipts or anything to back up these figures,
There are some.
There's some.
but not complete.
No, we're gonna get there. So the reason why we asked for the public committee to look at the expenditures, because there was a budget and a scope of this project. It appears as if it didn't matter. So we got looking, and so there's 40, we had a CD, and on the CD are 40 draws, or project draws if you will. 44. And here's a typical project draw. They all have the same cover letter. It says disbursement request. And it goes on to say that they're scheduled to the project, everything's on the right, all the necessary permits were obtained, it's a reimbursement request, et cetera, et cetera. Now, every one of these has a signature of somebody requesting it, but it never references any type of like consent agenda or any type of approval process from the city. And so it's like some of these are $8–10 million of disbursements, but at no point does it show any type of board review.
Who was sending the?
The finance director, sometimes the assistant finance director, their signatures I don't know. But like I say, at a minimum, I would assume, and for the alderman and the former alderman, I know there's a spending authority or at least a percentage. Do you, Greg, or Barb, do you remember these ever becoming before the board for review? Any type of agenda? I would have assumed. So we pulled this one in particular because it was interesting. Because in 2008, the city entered into an MOU with Lee Updike. For those of you that don't know, Lee was a director of buildings and grounds for the school district. In 2008, they entered into a memorandum of understanding with Lee that said that he was going to be used as a consultant for the move of the school district building. Now, what's interesting about this give me just a second. My documents got all the way now. What's interesting about this was, in the 2009 audit from the school district, he's still listed as a district employee. So they entered into this agreement. Here's a sample invoice of Mr. Updike. Now, Mr. Updike made $105,000 for this agreement in 1 year. Here's an example of the bill that he submitted. Now, look at the date.
2004.
2004. Now, the MOU was approved in 2008. These bills were generated in 2008. So he referred back 4 years. Now look at these meetings. Now mind you, he's the director of buildings and grounds. Met with Dr. Houck. Does anybody remember who Dr. Houck is? He's the superintendent. He's the director of buildings and grounds. The school district's paying his salary at this point. He billed $105. Met with Dr. Houck again, met with Dr. Clausen. The next one here was a particular favorite of mine. Let me find it.
When were those paid?
In 2008, I like this one right here. He got paid $152 to write a memo to his boss.
You still around?
I don't know.
Still alive.
And this was 2004, mind you.
He was billing to prep for, he was billing to meet with people to prepare for other meetings. He was billing to meet with people to prepare for meetings. Yeah, the assumption is that he was keeping track of his time and came up with invoices that went back 40 years.
But either way, he was still on the payroll of the schools.
We don't know. What we do know is, according to these records, he got paid $105,000 by the project for consulting fees.
Okay, so here is draft number 4. It was signed by Dan Estes. There's no board action. Releasing $1.26 million to Foundry.
Can you pull that down a little bit, Square?
Sorry.
There you go.
There we go. $1.3 million to Foundry. You may know what Foundry makes? We found out. They make network switches. This is enough network switches to redesign the whole school district's network backbone. $1.3 million. One expenditure.
Well, it wasn't all the Foundry. Foundry only got 1.26 million.
Right. As far as documentation, the only documentation we were provided were letters like this from the school district that says, please remit payment. There's no invoice. There's no products. There's no idea of what was purchased.
They referenced the invoices, but they didn't include the invoices. There are some invoices for the construction part of the project.
There are. So, yes, we're being petty, I guess. You know, we're asking to have accounting. I asked specifically of the finance director when we met in our one meeting with these 6 boxes, and these were the documents that were given to us on a CD from the bank. Now, we got that CD on April 29th, which was oddly enough when the city's attorney said, we've never responded back to any of their requests. Well, we didn't even get the documents that we requested in February until almost May. There's 44 draws, roughly 1,300 pages. Some of them are redacted with the black Sharpie. We don't know what they're for, but the amounts are still there. It just, you know, doesn't make sense. I know the board asked the attorney at length, the TIF attorney, have you seen the expenses? Do they make sense to you? Have you reviewed them? I know it was asked at least 5 times, and I never heard an answer.
When did you get the CD?
On April 29th.
What was the date on when the CD was created? Because you looked on your computer and you could see
I can
when
tell
the
you.
CD was burned.
You don't have the CIA.
I don't know.
Okay, so here's the, if you know about computers, here's the CD. Can you see when it was made, burned?
Yeah.
May 18th?
March 18th.
March 18th.
We received it, signed for it on April 29th. Any questions so far? I'm sorry.
No,
I'm trying to make this interesting. So,
no questions at all.
I know. I've been asked, somebody have a question? Okay. I've been asked, what do we want? What's our point in all this? Well, one, I live here. You know, we have a vested interest in Raytown succeeding, and I have a vested interest in the fire department's, the revenue the taxpayers give us. If it's being taken from us to support a project, that it was spent as it was promised, that the city honored their end of the agreement, that the developer honored their end of the agreement, and that everything was on the up and up. Now, I asked the finance director to his face on our one meeting, without these 6 boxes of accounting and documents, how did you prepare these annual statements? Well, that's when I got the answer that well, no one checks them to see how accurate they are. And that would explain why the numbers are, I mean, I'm guessing that explains why the numbers vary so much from year to year. I don't know how the city's auditor was able to audit these documents, because they didn't have them.
Well, we were told that they were held in trust at UMD and they weren't subject to city audit.
That's true.
So they weren't even audited by the city's auditor. Is what we were told.
Right. So what do we want? We would like to see a public commission form to go through these expenses. Go back after whoever, if everything's on the up and up, it's on the up and up. Just from the cursory review that we've made, again, we're a fire department. I am not a forensic accountant. I'm not a TIF expert. I've spent a lot of time on this, and numbers just don't add up. They don't make sense. There's more questions than answers. So have this looked at. That's why we're calling for the audit. Why, if you haven't signed the petition, please do. We feel there's more than enough grounds here to justify having an audit. We want any overpayments that we've made refunded to us. And we want to either modify the agreement on project 1 to reflect our sales tax and the fact that if they're not going to use it as they told us, that's fine. Then let's sit down and work out a new agreement. But you know, there's nothing wrong. You know, there's nothing wrong with us standing up for ourselves and saying, this is where our money is supposed to go. You didn't spend it that way. We don't want to pay it anymore. Now, if there's an agreement we can come to in consensus, we're welcome to talk about that. Absolutely. All we've ever asked for is to have a conversation with people from the city who can actually make a decision. Since this has gone on, that we've notified the city in October of 2015. To date, I have never been contacted by the city administrator. We've never met with the city administrator. We've never emailed the city administrator. We've never had any decision-making person come over here and sit down and have a conversation with us
Well, that's
about making this better.
That's not entirely true. I mean, we've spoken with numerous aldermen.
Correct.
So
But we're told to leave it in the hands of the attorney and the people working on this process.
part of our struggle has been determining who the decision maker is at the city, because it takes a majority of the board of aldermen, and you don't know who you can work with that can actually say yes or no to anything you could agree to.
Ideally, I would like to see the city put together a couple aldermen, maybe the mayor, and sit down and we'll put together 3 members and see if we can't come to, same way we arrived at this agreement in 2007, should be the same way we arrived at our current situation and how we make it better. And that was able to take place then. But we can't get there. It's been frustrating.
Right.
Yes.
Personally, I think that it is so mind-boggling, everything that you've shown us, that you can't put together 6 people in this community to come up with that solution. You need people that do this for a living, who are schooled in it. And I think your answer truly is to go with the state audit.
Well, I'm talking 2 different things. I'm talking about the review of the funds that were expended. And I hear what you're saying there, and I'm, certainly, I don't disagree with that. But in the absence of, or until we get one, I think someone should be looking and doing some, where did the money go? And was it spent like we were told? And then
It's more, I realize you have a vested interest as the fire department and such, but to me, for the community, that is the more important issue. Is to look at, you know, how this is affecting everybody and how our streets are being paved with sand and gravel. You know, I mean, let's face it, we're paying the cost. So we should move forward on that, and I think that your solutions may come out of that same model.
And that, you know, and I don't disagree with you. We're, at this time, the district is not paying the request made by the city for the sales tax reimbursement. We've been holding it. We feel we're well within our right to do so, and once they demonstrate that everything's been met and that the terms and conditions that were agreed upon in 2007 are in place and honored, then we'll continue. But, you know, I regret deeply that, you know, the mayor is a good friend of mine, and I think he's a good man. I wish he was more active in this. I wish he was here tonight, because he is my friend, and I don't mean to chastise him or make him feel he's not welcome. As a matter of fact, I went to all the board that says here after they were meeting Wednesday night and assured them that I would not pick on them, that I valued their input and I wanted them to feel like they're welcome here and that they wanted to participate in this process, and I'm grateful that they're here. Yes, Michael?
You and I have had numerous conversations where we have, you know, the success of the fire district is inextricably tied to the success of Raytown or the failure of Raytown. We are not an entity that doesn't rely on Raytown's success for our own success. We have no motivation here, you know, that's anything nefarious. We want the city to be successful and to be productive and to bring in new businesses and do all those things, because we're tied to that.
And that's a very important point. The city and the fire district are not truly adverse in this situation. And I certainly regret if there's been any perception on the side of the city or the city attorney, but we're not adverse. Both the city of Raytown and the fire district have the same goals, the same fiduciary responsibilities with regard to taxpayer dollars. You really all should be working toward the same end, and that's to just make sure that, you know, the money is being administered properly and the agreements are being followed properly. You know, like I say, there's an issue, obviously, the deal that was sold didn't happen. So we now have a situation that is going to be challenging, and again, I do not represent the city, and it's not my place to speak as to how the city wants to handle this. The city has an attorney. They've retained an attorney specifically to represent the TIF commission. You know, I am here simply to assist and help move things forward in a productive manner. So.
Anybody else?
Did you say the current bond rate's 6%?
Interest rate.
It's between there's different terms, and the document that spells it out, they're between 5.4 and 5.8, depending on the length.
Well, surely bond issuance is 3% now.
We just refinanced ours at 2.75, was that what it was?
I believe so,
2.69. That's what it was.
That could be done in the interim to slow a little bit of the bleeding.
Well, and then, see, these bonds are different than general obligation bonds. That's an important distinction. These bonds are not backed by the full faith and good intent of the city. As a matter of fact, the city is only obligated to examine and allocate money annually. So therefore, they pay a higher interest rate and a higher premium because there is no guarantee that the bondholders will get paid.
And I don't think you could refinance these bonds right now. Maybe you could, I just don't see how you could. Because the bondholders would certainly want to see all your financial information. And we can't even find it all. I mean, we haven't been able to.
No.
So if the city chose to default, obviously obviously that would affect the credit rating and ability to issue.
Well, it's not a true, from what we figured out, it's not a true default. They just failed to allocate their annual portion of the payment for the bonds. It's not a default like when you get your house foreclosed on. My understanding is that it's a little bit different because the loan, it continues to collect taxes and those taxes continue to go to the bondholders. The city just fails to allocate their portion, which would certainly have numerous negative repercussions for the whole community, no question about that, but.
Oh, it would affect the city's credit rating, I'm sure.
Yeah, right.
To the point, the reason that the fire district was able to refund and reissue their bond at such an incredibly low rate, competitive rate, is because they have an incredibly high credit rating. I don't know, and I cannot speak to this, but the city is not going to be in that same position. And if this bond is not paid out, I would have to think that would have some impact on the city's general ability in terms of where their rate's gonna be, what their credit rating would be, where their rate's gonna be. If your credit rating is not as good, you have to pay a higher rate to entice people to purchase your bonds. In other words, they wouldn't necessarily see much savings. And again, I do not want to speak specifically to Raytown's situation, but in general, that's how bond issues work.
Let me sum up real quick, then we can continue having these discussions. But basically, I believe I've demonstrated documented evidence to support the fact that there's inaccuracies throughout the administration of this project. I believe we've demonstrated clearly that there was an intent when the agreement was made in 2007. Again, there was clear understanding told to the fire district from Mr. King Hershey, from the city and our agreements, and we upheld our end until it was discovered that they changed it and didn't follow the scope, and now we're withholding our funds until they decide how they want to go from here. I believe we've shown that it took us forever to get expenditures. Like I said, we got them roughly a month ago after requesting in February. And even those were inaccurate and actually gave us more questions than answers we had. And going forward, we want to have a productive relationship. We've demonstrated that. I've got ample documentation here to support where we are. And this is all documents that are readily available from the public. These are not documents that we had to get through special means or whatever. We simply found them on the internet or made sunshine requests. And going forward, I hope the city sits down with us. I hope we can come to some resolution, and I hope we figure out what have a conversation. Mayor Frank, your questions that you posed would be great ones to ask during the public hearing. They're required to have. We were told they were going to have that in February. There's a press release from the mayor stating it was going to happen. We met with Joe Willard and Mr. Lawfrey on March 4th. It was going to happen. We're now in June. I don't know why it takes that long to schedule this, but.
And they have to publish notice.
Right. One last thing, and this is kind of out of sequence here, but it was brought up by, I believe, Jim Azier Wednesday night that, well, in 2011 when this was changed, it was advertised in the local paper. That's not true. Because Randy, in 2011, who was the local paper?
I probably was, I'm not sure.
It sold out.
I'd sold out then.
And then they had shut their doors.
Shut their doors, okay.
So Raytown did not have a local.
Was no local paper.
There was no local paper. So in the absence of, what they do is they advertise in a document called the Daily Record, which works good for bondholders or works good for developers or people like that who subscribe to this and get it. But as far as residents to come out, it doesn't work.
It doesn't meet the state statute.
And is that a fair statement, Randy?
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, that's how it happens. So it wasn't exactly like all of a sudden there was this notification made and everybody knew it was happening and there was no. That didn't happen. It met the law, but it doesn't meet the intent of the agreement, or at least of the statement. So with that said, thank you all for coming. Feel free if you have more questions, hit us up, stop by. If you haven't signed the petition and you think I've given you enough grounds tonight to at least warrant the state coming in, taking a look at it. There's petitions out in the hallway to sign. If you'd like to take blank forms with you and help us get signatures, I'll work all the help we can get. Thank you, folks.